Welcome to The Invisible.
Hello, welcome to this new episode of The Invisible. On this occasion, I have the pleasure of introducing you to a very special person. His name is Ko Biel Giner, and he is Spanish. He is a psychologist, but not only that, he is also a psychic and a medium. A very particular, very interesting combination that we are going to delve into and explore during this interview. Additionally, we are going to understand how he incorporates his experience as a medium into his daily life. Ladies and gentlemen, Biel Giner. Hello, Biel. Welcome to this third episode of The Invisible. Biel, I want to ask you a very particular question given your experience, both as a medium, a psychic, and also as a psychologist, right? What came first? Was it psychology, one mediumship, or the psychic experience that came first? Where does all this come from?
Good question. Let's see what comes first, right? The chicken or the egg? I believe that the psychic experience came first. With the psychic experience, I saw that I could help people who perhaps had problems, right? And from there, the innate psychologist comes in. And then there's the training, which is really the training comes first. Psychic or a psychic part, because I first developed as a clairvoyant, and then I developed as a psychologist. Well, as a clairvoyant and as a psychic, because deep down I started doing aura readings, and through the aura readings, I captured the mental body, the emotional body, and then I would refer it to therapy, because I saw patterns there, right? And energetic or repetitive thought patterns. And from there, I started to train as a medium, to experiment as a channeler, to contact other realities with other entities, because I not only contact the deceased, but also beings from other planes. And well, that has been more or less chronologically the life path of Biel.
Hey Biel, and how is this integrated? I imagine I see it from a perspective like this because as someone completely ignorant, at least from the psychology standpoint. Well, not so ignorant, but somewhat. I'm not a psychologist. So, I imagine, and I see it as something very complementary. I mean, the fact of having a psychic or mediumistic ability and also having training in psychology is a very good complement eventually to be able to conduct a well-managed therapy. So how do you handle it? How do you experience it? The fact of being psychic and being a medium means that in your therapies, when someone comes to your consultation for a purely psychological therapy, you could eventually also perceive it from the psychic field and from there be able to guide it.
Yes, it's not common at all. In fact, it's, since I'm atypical, or I'm like the first one, right? The arrowhead of maybe some who will come, who surely, well, I would like to train people like that, so well prepared, because it's complex, since I was very dichotomous, very divided, because there was a part, very scientific. And besides, you surround yourself with people who are scientists, who research, and all this. They deny it. In fact, they denied it without investigating it. So it's like, damn, I offer myself to be investigated. I mean, I'm a researcher and I know there has to be a test subject. And it's like they don't even consider it, right? And in the end, you say, well, if there is evidence, even if it's not scientific, but there is empirical evidence, statistical. Why isn't it studied? Now it seems that science is more open, but 20 years ago when I studied, it wasn't. So I think that yes, it is very complementary. The thing is, it was very difficult for me to integrate it. I mean, for me, there has been a lot of work, a lot of therapy, because on one hand, it was like, I know what I feel, and I am like this. I can't help it. I have to come out of the spiritual closet. But on the other hand, it was like, I deny it, because 2 + 2 is 4. And I have to know why it happens to me, how I can recreate it, and why sometimes it doesn't work, and not understand. But of course, then science also has errors and has a margin of error. So it's like, well, why am I demanding so much of myself? And all this demand is sometimes also transgenerational, right? It's the family, the pressure of do something, right? Something that is tangible. This is, at heart, very beautiful, but at the same time, because it's personal growth, but costly. No one has been told. Of course, when they see me and say, oh, I would love to do what you do, I say, well, spend 20 years studying and training. And then when you're well trained, you pursue a career in psychology, and then you start working.
That's right. Hey, but look, there's something really interesting, and I'm going to ask you this question based on your words. You mentioned coming out of the spiritual closet. From my experience as a medium, knowing other mediums, we all at some point have to come out of the spiritual closet, as you say, right? And dare to tell the family, those closest to us initially, you know what? This is happening to me. How did you experience it? How was your family? What was your family like? Because sometimes when families are very conservative, it's harder. When they are more open, it's simpler. What was your experience? At what age did you experience it? And how was that process?
Regarding the family, no one explained it to me. I don't come from a family of witches. No. Surely there might be, right? If we explore. And in fact, I think there was one on my father's side, a medium, and on my mother's side, a healer. But of course, no one explained anything to me. I did everything myself. I was a very strange child. I already, when I was 12 or 10 years old, I already had my allowance. And all my friends or normal kids were going to spend it on candy and arcades, right? At the arcade games. And I saved up to buy books on witchcraft, magic, and who knows? I've been a strange child. I understand that. Born like that, with that goal, with that, yes, like that, life goal in the end. We have that tendency. We can't avoid it. Even as scientific as it may be, I always included a part that's mysterious, right? Like, let's investigate, because in the end, the researcher, if they research more of the same, this can't be. Let's see if we can capture things. Of course, it leads to frustration, because they've even tried to tell me that acupuncture is scientifically proven, and it's not true. I am an acupuncturist, and it is not scientifically proven. Because a scientist opens a body, and there are no nadis, no chakras, no energy channels. There aren't any. Yes, there are, but they can't be tested. So if it can't be, I mean, statistically, they know it works, but they don't know how to recreate it, of course. So no, they don't understand why.
Biel, is there someone in your life who has been decisive in giving you the push you needed to start assuming, to begin to investigate and delve into these topics? Or was it something that came very much from within you?
No, it came very much from within me. And in fact, I have been self-taught until as I tell you, very young, at 7 years old. My mother is a doctor. Imagine, she's as scientific as can be. And I had a fever, and I saw her grandfather. Well, I didn't know him, but I described a man at the foot of her bed. And it's the time I've seen a spirit most physically. And of course, she said, well, it's a feverish hallucination. You've studied it, because she got very scared, right? And she wanted to close that off and said, well, you you're describing my grandfather. It's, it's like something, what a coincidence, right? That you're describing my grandfather, but I'd rather not know and assume this is a feverish hallucination. And that's it. So, of course, I've been dealing with this from a very young age. And of course, at 7 years old, things were already happening to me. I was already feeling things. At 12, I started using tarot and self-taught until I was 17, when I took my first paid course in parapsychology, where I realized that they were scientists studying people like me. It gave me openness.
Bill, before closing the topic of childhood, and I ask you this because I've seen that several people who are mediums, whom I know, experience the same thing, including myself. Were you sent to a psychiatrist?
No, not to a psychiatrist, but yes, to a psychologist. It was a short period of time because deep down, I've been quite reserved. In fact, when I saw that this wasn't well, I've been able to. Of course, I was quite trained because I was hiding psychic things and homosexuality. So it was like, well, I'm quite reserved to say, well, I can't.
A double closet.
What? Could you say that again, please?
A double closet you had.
A double closet. Yes, a closet background. It's like you're in the closet, but at the back. Of course. So, and in fact, today, I open up more and more, right? And I've also gone to therapy for that, because I might seem very open and spontaneous. But really, those who know me know, it's because they've taken an interest in going deeper, because I'm very reserved, because I created myself this way. I had to survive like that because I saw that it scared them, that if not, I could lose friends, right? When there are friends who sometimes, when these abilities awakened in me, well, I couldn't control them, and I had what are called premonitions. So when they told me, we were at the party drinking, right? Here in Spain, it's called botellón. And I would say, no, not down that street. What if we get mugged? And then we would get mugged. It can generate fear, even make people look at you like, you created it. So I chose to keep quiet.
Hey, Bill, and look, I was thinking at this moment, have you noticed that most people who are mediums are women? I hold a workshop and 15 women and 1 man, 2 men sign up.
Absolutely.
Why do you think that happens? Do you think there's a social, cultural bias? Or do you think it has to do with something beyond that? With the sensitivity of the person themselves?
I think it has to do with sensitivity. And this it's not about gender. It's about energy. If you have because, for example, it's just that, of course, we have a scientific mind. I've also done that analysis of why in the spiritual world, there are more women. And in fact, there are few men. And the few men there are, almost all of them are homosexual, meaning they have feminine energy. And the one who is heterosexual, which is your case, right? That you are the atypical one in this case, has a lot of sensitivity, that doesn't mean he lacks masculine energy at all, because in fact, there are women who have a lot of masculine energy, much more than the husband, for example. But it's about feminine energy. The feminine energy is inward, intuitive, sensory. Masculine energy is more outward, action-oriented. Both are always present, but in this case, this energy is more active. So it's not so much about, the issue of gender, but rather about which energy is being expressed.
Sure, but we can understand that each gender has a tendency to have a type of energy, and from there we can extrapolate it to what we can define as a gender.
Of course.
Hey, and moving on to what you were telling me about your experiences in your parapsychology training. How was that experience? Within parapsychology, I have the impression, because I've also had some exposure to parapsychology, that there are many people interested in the subject. They are very intellectual, very scientific, but they have zero sensitivity. So they will see everything from a very theoretical point of view, Mardahon, but in practice, they have no experience. How was your experience? Did you have experiences within parapsychology, something that really left a mark on you?
The exact same thing happened to me as you're describing. It's like, let's see, it contributed to me. It was my first course. It helped me a lot. I saw many cases where they were like me. I didn't. I felt accompanied. I saw people doing things differently from the things I did. It was like, wow, there's a diverse world of psychics or sensorial or sensitive people that you say, wow, there are people like me, even people who might have things more messed up than I do. And I could understand or at least relax. But it is true that, of course, they are scientists and they study paranormal cases or psychic people. So they didn't teach me to train myself. What they showed me were things they did with me to know what a degree of potential I could have or what kind of abilities I had. And, well, it is true that we did some field research. And yes, I do benefit from that, but it's more research, but it's what you say. They are not psychics. They don't know. I mean, when they see that they feel something, that a light goes out, they don't know what it is. They can't perceive it. Of course, I was there to perceive it. For example, we went to a guy's house, and because ashtrays were flying, I perceived another type of entities. And when he called us, I didn't perceive entities. A poltergeist case of a transient spirit is very rare. Therefore, no. The energetic charge or the residue, right? That in the end is generated by living in a house. I also didn't feel it was dense, There was no violence. So it's like, well, he called us again. We went back and I tested again and said, there are no entities here.
Usually when that happens, it's because someone is in a high emotional or stress situation and generates this.
There it goes. That's what I learned. That not everything is spirits. And that there was a case when passing the tests. There was a case of psychoragia, what parapsychology calls psychoragia. Psychoragia, for those who are listening and don't know, is when you are in a state of high stress or are very agitated with your own psyche, with your brain waves. That is, you can have uncontrolled telekinesis, meaning you can make things move, think it's a ghost and get scared, but it's not any kind of entity. It's actually you.
Exactly. And notice that the phenomena, I don't know if you've heard, obviously you have, of pyrokinesis. In cases of pyrokinesis, there is always some teenager, usually a teenager, who is experiencing a high-stress situation that generates these pyrokinesis phenomena. Here in Chile a few years ago, there was an experience of pyrokinesis in a rural family a little further south of Santiago, which was documented and everything. And there was spontaneous combustion anywhere in the house. Finally, it was deduced that there was a boy with a very high level of stress.
Of course, that's why I investigated those cases and saw that there were people who had other abilities, but mine weren't so bad, so they didn't get along so badly, basically.
Exactly. Hey, BL, within your experiences, how do you live life? Do you feel comfortable with the fact of how open have you been in terms of showing yourself to the world as a medium? Because there's a lot of prejudice, a lot of preconceptions. Some people take it one way or another. Has it been easy for you in your country? Or is it a bit complicated? Is there a lot of prejudice? How do you handle it? Do you share it with those close to you? Or is there only a certain group that knows this side of you and others that don't? How do you handle it?
It's true that people have always known about my witch side. With those closest to me, I don't open up much, but with those I do, I really open up, and I have my support group, my pillars. So I've always opened up to them, and my family knows, although I haven't spoken openly about it with my family either. Why? For what? So they can judge me or say some nonsense to me. And no, I'd rather not. Well, they know that I like the subject, but it's not that I like the subject, it's that I was born this way. So I think people didn't know how far I could go. That's the thing. But even my own friends. So it's not the same to read the cards at a dinner, which I often did, and got a lot of information and they found it fun, as it is to suddenly, just 2 years ago, come out of the spiritual closet on social media. And everyone has seen me. And of course, people who have known me all my life at 40 years old say to me, I'm amazed, Bianc, because you talk to the dead. And I've seen a girl I know whom you don't know, and she joined the live stream and you told her things that it was impossible for you to know. They're amazed. And it hasn't been poorly received. Honestly, it hasn't been poorly received. But it's true that there are people who, of course, I'm not saying I appear in a video and say I'm a medium or I'm psychic. No, it's more like, look at this piece. Look at a piece of the session. Look, here's an interview. Here's live mediumship. I show myself and I expose myself moreover. I even share sessions where the client says, it's not evidence, so I consider it a failed proof. And 3 days later, they send me a message saying, now I know what they meant, or I didn't have this information, but I asked my mother and this did happen. That's on my profile. I mean that, and of course, so.
You are willing to hear what they want to hear. And there are things they suddenly don't want to hear because they don't have it in mind. And suddenly, you reveal it to them. And they haven't incorporated it. And then over time, they process or find out. That's a classic.
Yes, and those who don't want to see, don't want to see. But that also happens in psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is also a very intangible world. It's not a disease that I can see on an x-ray. It's not a pill you take and it no longer hurts. No, this is a wound of the soul. So I've also been told I don't believe in psychologists. And it's like, well, psychology is indeed a science. So if you tell me you don't believe in psychology, well, yes, there are people who don't, who just don't, and I don't argue with them. If not, well, that's it. Nothing happens. I don't make a half-hearted attack like that of Caputo.
Yes. I understand perfectly. I have a friend I met here. Quite impressive, because she is a very good medium. But
A very good medium. I love it.
But look, I'm talking about the Chilean friend who is a very good medium and also did it. But notice that she has taken a memory. She would ask for the other side for about 20 seconds and then look at me, for example. And the person was facing away. If she looks at me, I go and tell her. If not, I keep it to myself. And she always used that filter. So she would say to me, look, ta, 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 ta. Now let's wait. 20 seconds, 10, 9, 8. Nothing happened. I continue as usual. I forget about it. But there were situations where the person would turn around, look at her, and she would say, okay, I'm going. Boom. That's how occult mediums work, who are usually people with a gay, very ostentatious mediumship, and have had it since always, since childhood, like someone who has it very ingrained in their life.
And at first, it was a bit of an assault, yes, but I understood that it's disrespectful and that it doesn't scare them. They don't expect that. In fact, one who came, as I said, for tarot, meaning she wasn't unfamiliar with this world or unaware of what I do or don't do. She came for tarot and asked me if her grandmother had a mental illness. So I said, wow, well, hold on. I did this and said, well, yes, she tells me she has bipolar disorder. And she said, how? She says, did you ask her? I said, yes. And she turned pale and needed 2 or 3 days to process it. It's as if, like, she didn't expect it. She had never seen me work like that. I say, well, does it resonate with you that sometimes she had this symptomatology, this other one, because she's telling me this other thing? And she says, yes, but don't ever do that again. That, people are afraid.
Yes, it's true. Now, maybe not so much here in Chile. In South America, they might be more open. In Brazil, needless to say, they are much more open. But I imagine that Europe must be more complex, the topic more closed. Even though Europe is the cradle of Kardecist Spiritism, but
True.
21st century Europe is much more closed. And he wanted to ask you a question. What's up? I imagine that maybe it has happened to you that suddenly someone comes to you, a patient, for psychology, and you are interacting with them, and for example, you realize that they have some interference beyond the psychological, maybe mediumistic or energetic, that there's something that could be addressed from another angle. How do you handle that?
Well, usually when I have a patient who comes just for psychotherapy, I try to incorporate is other types of information just through psychotherapy. It's like I also take the liberty sometimes that when they come for a consultation, it's because their soul is asking me for help, any kind of help. The thing is, there are certain limits that I have to respect with this person, especially on a legal level, at least here in Spain. So,
And ethical as well.
and ethical as well. So, it is true that sometimes in psychotherapy, I can do some energetic movement or aura combing without explicitly telling them what I'm doing. And if some kind of spirit talks to me, I act as if I'm super smart and intelligent and incorporate that into the therapy dynamic to give them the emotional impact they need without telling them it's a certain spirit or that someone is talking to them. And for now, I'm working like this. It's easier to work with people who come for the other thing. And then we direct them to therapy. And then it combines very well. And in fact, it's being very well received. So I think more and more, I'm going to present myself as a psychic psychologist because that's where I feel comfortable. I don't have to squeeze myself into I don't know, into clothes that aren't my size. And gosh, and in that, I am unique. So I think that's what I need to enhance.
In essence, you're telling me that when you work with your psychological therapy patients, I imagine not in all cases, but in some, you also approach it from a spiritual or intangible point of view, but you do it subtly because it came to you through psychology, but you also handle it from another area without saying it like subtly. Do you understand why? Why there's something of that too? In that sense, it's very complementary to what you do as well.
Of course, very complementary. Just like I can perfectly see a person when they come to me for a week. And when we've worked through 3 or 4 therapy sessions and the aura, when they arrive, is not the same. I know that person has integrated something that their energy has changed. So of course, I can do an X-ray. I mean, I have more tools to work with in therapy.
Maybe you should start a school.
I just simply have it.
I was thinking, like, for psychologists, to integrate what is the more holistic part, but from psychology, like a prerequisite to be a psychologist. And I'm going to incorporate this area that you might not have so incorporated. At least you haven't worked on it. Look, how interesting, huh?
It's in process. In fact, the school is already set up. Now the content is missing, but it's there. It's in development because I believe that it's something the world needs, right? To incorporate this science and awareness and use the energetic and spiritual field in something that I have really proven to have very good results.
Bill, at some point we talked and you told me that you had some experiences in the past, right? In which you saw how your mediumistic experiences, like experiences very much oriented at many times towards taking spirits or disembodied entities, however you want to call them, that were a bit lost or wandering, how to guide them to the light. Isn't that right? To take spirits or disembodied entities, whatever you want to call them, that were a bit lost or wandering, like guiding them to the light, right? You are telling me that now, as time has passed, you no longer experience these types of experiences so intensely. They are no longer such a part of you. You're connecting with another area in this vast field. I would like it if you could elaborate on that. It would be interesting to understand.
Of course. Look, well, as a good researcher, as I've already mentioned, I have had that clinical eye to observe how I have been progressing and how my colleagues perceive or how my colleagues present with this new mediumship, as there is now a wave of new mediums. And then, well, I have been very studious and from the old school. So what is there about all that? No, right? About because I have indeed helped souls pass on, but it's true that now I don't connect with such wandering souls. And of course, I have been researching about that. What's happening? Well, according to my guides and my perceptions, I see that. Of course, I also read auras and many cultures, many religions, but to talk about how the energetic bodies, your entire energetic system, unfolds when we die. Therefore, auras are one thing, and the energetic bodies make up what would be the astral field. The astral body comprises the mental field and the emotional field, as well as the etheric, which would be like the more earthly or denser parts of what is the human being. The soul is the divine spark that can never be lost. It always ascends and always goes to the light. It's like the filament, it's like the extension of that higher self, that your quantum divine double that will always ascend. But of course, you can leave a trail like slugs or snakeskin. Exactly, which is not the snake, but it's a part of the snake, even though it has already detached from it. But that would form like that shell, or rather imprint that you see as someone lost, right? Who repeats the same situation over and over again because they got stuck there. That emotional imprint they couldn't overcome, and that has remained there in a loop. That's what many mediums who are called ferrymen or rescue mediums have many names. Well, that's what we bring to the light as those remnants for recycling, which is what shamans also do, the recovery of lost fragments of the soul. It's not that the soul fragments and gets lost. No. The soul is pure. It cannot be sold to any demon. No, it's not like that. It's this, right? It's like we unfold, and there's a part being multidimensional that is much more earthly. And if it feels, because it has consciousness, because it has mind and emotion, it can decide not to want to go to the light or not realize that it has to transcend because something has remained unfinished here. So in fact, you also have to differentiate when you do research what is an energetic imprint, where you go to a place and feel, or you can even perceive a situation where you can record an EVP, but there is no consciousness. No one will respond if you speak. And then there are the entities that do have consciousness.
Now, let's see if I understand you correctly. That fragmentation, right?
Yes.
Which we can perhaps define as part of the mental and emotional body, maybe?
Yes, that make up the astral body.
Sure, but is this fragmentation conscious? Is it important? Is it necessary to bring them to the light, or is it a fragmentation that is not decisive? Why do I bring this up? I make a distinction between the mental body, emotional body, if we want to name it, right? Spirit and soul. We, for me, are spirits living in a space that I named intermission, just to give it a name. You understand? And that spirit is projected to live an experience, incarnated in an experience determined by a limited space-time, basically. And for that, it needs a body, and for that, it needs a structure that allows it to live in that dimension. And for that, the soul exists, which is like it's a projection of the spirit. That's how I see it. And
yes,
when you live the experience, you incorporate experiences, belief systems, emotions, a lot of things that ultimately nourish this spirit. But when you die, the first thing that dissolves is the physical body, naturally.
yes.
But there is another field, which we could define as the mental or emotional body, that could eventually, depending on how deeply rooted it is with the experience, remain for a while without dissolving, without understanding what it's in. Do you understand? A bit lost, so to speak. And that will be very much determined by the experience you lived here. And that field, perhaps, is what manifests, which I usually know as energetic field imprinting in some place, right? Why? I would tell you that 99.999% of the EVP recordings made in cemeteries, abandoned orphanages, abandoned psychiatric hospitals, all those EVPs, it's not that there's an entity there trapped eternally. Simply, it is a very powerful energetic imprint that can somehow be perceived. With EVPs, with sensitives who are very powerful kinesthetics, you see, they can come to capture that information. And furthermore, if we as a collective now generate the idea and concept that a certain phenomenon occurs in that space, a certain entity is seen, we project it mentally. One starts projecting, and we can create a sort of entity that we could define as a tulpa, and that entity can even manifest, materialize, but it does not have its own consciousness. I don't know how you see it, let's say. Now, do you think those fragments that remain of us here are conscious, or are they fragments that are not part of our being, of our experience?
Sure, let's see. It's a good question. Because I think that let's say the human being is conscious, right? According to our criteria, yes. But those of us who are mediums also know that when we depart, we have a much more expanded consciousness, right? Well, this is the same. When someone stays here, they think they are a person without a body. So they remain with the same thoughts, the same emotions, the same belief system. So if it is,
Sorry to interrupt you, but when you say someone stays there here, are you saying that someone who has passed away but doesn't become aware and stays here? There is something of them that stays here, living in a sort of illusion, thinking they are still on this plane, but they are no longer here.
of course, that's the differentiation I make. That being multidimensional, there are parts of us that do ascend, therefore the divine spark, the soul, with whom we communicate in this new mediumship, they are all well. They are in the light. This is the soul. It is that spark that has incarnated, that comes from the higher or divine being, which is purity. So it will always be there. In fact, many questions that people ask me are, and if they have reincarnated, can you still talk to them? Of course. First, sometimes mediumship, many mediums now are secular. It's like, we don't know if they reincarnate or not. Let's talk to your relative. But well, many clients ask this. So I tell them, I say, yes, of course. From where are we going to contact? We can contact your relative just the same. It doesn't matter if we contact from the higher self. There is a part of your relative's information that will respond as your relative, because they know that even though they have had more lives and other types of records, they know that in this one with you, they have had this bond and these experiences. Therefore, they will give you what you need to navigate this life as best as possible.
Well, what you're proposing is super interesting. First, I don't consider that mediumship can be defined as secular or non-secular. It is just mediumship. If someone considers themselves secular or non-secular, that's their problem, let's say. It's their way of facing life. And that's it. One doesn't exist over the other. I don't consider that there is a new mediumship or an old mediumship that's like a commercial or ego construction from my perspective. But because mediumship is ancestral, it's super old, it dates back to the Paleolithic. But I've even seen people who propose and are super critical of Spiritism without knowing it. And Spiritism is a philosophical doctrine that is 166 years old, and there is a lot of study, and it deserves full respect. And they don't even know it from ignorance, as if they belittle it by considering it something from the past, and they don't even understand that within Spiritism and in Kardasism there are also evidential aspects, because it is a very open doctrine in that sense. But beyond that, look at this. What you propose makes sense to me, because I have always understood that we are spirits projecting an experience here. That is, as spirits, we generate a soul, which is a vehicle to incorporate a physical body and have experiences on this plane. And this is the question I'm going to ask you. Do you believe that this spirit, when it incarnates in this experience, in this world, leaves this intermission space and comes to live the experience here? Or is it rather that this spirit living this experience is branched out? There is a fraction of it, a fractal of it, that lives this experience, but the spirit is always in another space? And when it stops living this experience, does it return? Or is it like, I finished the experience, but I have always been here?
I believe it is a fractal. That is the experience. One thing, of course, in terminology, but if not, people can get confused. What is spirit is called soul, right? The human soul, which some call spiritism, is that really when we see a spirit, it is not the soul. The soul is the bearer of the body. The soul will always ascend because it is the divine spark. So, the spirit, when we talk about the great spirit, higher self, those can be branched out, even in several lives. There can be several in several branches, several of your divines living the same experience in the same linear temporality. Of course, this is really splitting hairs. I mean, we go from mediumship to quantum physics, where there are already quantum physicists saying this, that they can, and the Marvel multiverses are also saying it. It's no longer just about comics, but they are already talking about realities. So I think we need to open our minds a bit, not close ourselves off. And when there are fellow mediums who say, oh my God, we shouldn't say there are lost spirits. And then there are others who say, no, not everyone is in the light. You're lying. Not everything is rosy. Well, I say, well, maybe everyone is right, because it depends on where each one connects from and with whom each one connects.
Exactly. We have to understand that mediumship, there are multiple ways to perceive. And mediumship has multiple ways of manifesting beyond what we might think is right or wrong, let's say. No, we are no one to define whether this medium is doing it wrong or right, or this is correct, this is incorrect. I think that's where our conflict comes in. The issue is basically being open enough to understand that and to connect genuinely. It doesn't go beyond that. Regarding your impression, at least what I understand from Spiritism, the spirit is the entity that lives as the experience. The soul is the incarnated spirit, basically. And you know what? There's something quite particular in this. I haven't shared much. And there are people whose minds have been blown by what I'm going to propose. Because, for me, because I'm asked the question, and I imagine you're asked many times, what happens if suddenly I die? To see my grandfather, I love him and I miss him. But if I get there and he's already reincarnated, I won't be able to see him anymore. Do you understand? That's the question. I have an answer to that. I would like to know what you would answer to that question that perhaps many people ask themselves.
I've never been asked that. I mean, I don't have an absolute truth, nor do I have all the answers, right? But from my feeling and where I am now, as you were saying it, I was talking to my guides, because I talk a lot with my guides. Because I've never considered it. And they show me that when, as if it were the higher self or the divine self, like a sun, where it is a place. And then in that place are all the yes, like the extensions it has had. And so even if your grandfather has reincarnated with everything that he has left pending for this life, if I go back there or I go there, I will find myself, because energy neither dies nor is destroyed. It only transforms. So they can adopt anybody they want. And my grandfather's experience is already there, so I will be with my grandfather and I will see my grandfather. In fact, in many sessions, they tell us who they are with. They are always accompanied. And logically there, they are surely not corporeal. They are not playing I don't know what. Because no, they show us doing things that they did in life. But because not even the type of bond is the same. We don't even have sex. There is no duality. So they tell us things that we can understand from our human mind. And that's fine. I've been told things that if I say them, your mind would be blown. So if we overcomplicate things, of course, people don't understand. So now that things are opening up, let's take it step by step.
I think we need to drop the bombs. Maybe I'm more radical in that. We need to.
But sometimes I've been radical, you know? I've been quite a hippie. But there are times when it's better with some lubrication and love.
There are people who are ready. So, like, if this resonates with them, even if it's just 10%, it's appreciated.
Logically, stirring things up makes people come out, right? To awaken people, but there's no rush. We are eternal.
Look at this. I have this impression. I mean, for a while now, I've been saying this is not something I think, I don't think this. I feel it. I act from here, and I feel it. That was another coming out of the closet, because deep down it was daring to say the certainties I feel, and I haven't felt them since I was 30, 40, or now that I've turned 50. But I feel this and have been clear about it since I was 10 years old. You understand? And and uh, and I've given myself the space to say it, you understand? Because before I would say no, but how am I going to try this? But I don't have arguments to say it. Enough. I spent a lot of time with that story. Now I say, if it resonates with someone, it resonates. And if it doesn't, that's fine too.
Trial and error.
And you know that what I feel is that there are different levels, right? There are levels. On the first plane, like when you leave here and you disincarnate, there's a kind of illusion, right? Which is very rooted in the experience here, based on the life experiences. You know, like, unless you are sufficiently lucid and understand, okay, I disincarnated and it's super clear. You understand? And then you move to another state. Otherwise, you'll stay in a state very similar to here, like in a dream. Everything is very much like a dream when you dream. Then there are other states where there is a materiality, but you experience another kind of illusion that is very ideal, you know? It's like paradise. Like I live this, but there's a remnant of the material experience. Then you will live in places where there are parks and houses, and you see your relatives as you saw them here and so on. And it's a very physical sensation. But there are other levels where none of that exists anymore. And it's just consciousness and being. And that consciousness that is recognized. Everyone recognizes each other as long as they maintain a certain degree of individuality, which at some point no longer exists. That separation of individuality, I don't know, it transforms into a kind of global collective.
Yes.
But if we limit ourselves to the second layer, when people incarnate, they are a projection of themselves. And finally, when they ask me that question, what happens if I don't, if I die and I want to see my grandfather and my grandfather has reincarnated, you are not going to connect with the incarnated one. You are going to connect with the essence of the incarnated one. And the essence of the incarnated one is not here. It is in another space that I define as intermission, just to give it a name. In that space, we are all there. Therefore, people, when they have suddenly lost a loved one, and the loved one leaves this existence, here we feel the lack, because we are used to it, because we are living a temporary experience, limited to what we are meant to live. An option we choose. But, in essence, you never lost them because your essence is on this plane, and so is theirs. And at that level of consciousness, they understand the experiences they are having here. Do you understand? You stop living here, you go to another plane, and you will understand. I never stopped being with my loved one. We were always connected. Here, it is a very limited and biased view of the experience. And that person could eventually live another reincarnation experience. You, in quotes, grandfather, could live another reincarnation experience just when you disincarnated. But you are not going to connect with your incarnated grandfather. You are connecting with the essence of your grandfather, who is on another plane, and you will recognize him for who he is. And the other interesting thing is, people in sessions manifest as they were here. That doesn't mean they are like that, in essence. They will present themselves that way so they can be recognized. But they are not. They are neither old, nor are they the determining personality structure of the experience. Bill, what do you think about this?
I think the same. I think the same. In the end, they show themselves. They give evidence, meaning I present myself this way so you can recognize me. It is true that depending on the layer of the dimension or the plane where they are, they have one way of communicating or another. There are many ways to say, you weren't the exemplary father, but such. Or for them to say, look, Jewish dog, because you have failed me and I can't be like this, So that's where it lies. The what we say, right? About the layers of planes, that when I've done a session and I see that the person wasn't in the light, I've moved them to the light so they could speak. When I've already made the change, and I work with only when they are in the light, because I only connect with that frequency, because I believe it's easier to work that way. That's when the client themselves. There's a case where a woman came and I opened the session, and then the husband starts saying things. He showed me a photo and so on. And she came because she had met another person, and it was like she needed her husband's permission not to feel guilty. And the husband told her that yes, he understood that she was living her life and that he honored her by living it. Of course, she said, how strange, because he was jealous. And then he told me, you have to clean the pool. And I said, wait, a sensitive moment. We're in an emotional space. What are you telling me about the pool? He says, you have to clean the pool. And he tells me, well, okay, I'll say it. I say, look, he's telling me that you have to clean the pool because you never clean the pool. And then she started crying and said, that's what he used to tell me. So it's true that they speak differently. They are much more open, they have much more awareness there on that plane. But it's true that they will give us things or evidence that tell us, it's me. What happens is that in what I criticized you for in life, well, now I realize being a spirit and not being stuck in a rigid, rough mental body with a belief system that I have decided, right, to go through this in a family that I have chosen, with an abusive father and a neglectful mother. In the end, what, I say, it like this is a cosmic big brother. And when we come here, we believe in the character. But when we leave from the set, we say, oh my, what a mess I've made in the house. And then we try to repair, not because I can't transcend, but because those over there have remained stuck in that moment. And so what we want is to provide a bit of balm so they can go through the process better.
Exactly. BL, it has been a very interesting experience to share with you. I appreciate your participation here on The Invisible. If you want to say something to the audience, this is the moment. Also, share with us where people can find you, and that's it.
Well, I want to send greetings to everyone, and I hope you stick around until the end, because sometimes we've talked about things that you might not understand at all, right? And I go through that, right? When they give me information and that information goes beyond my logic, as I am very down to earth. Sometimes I say, phew, holding on to this, is hard for me, or even believing it. So, well, I hope that little by little we can open minds. And that's it. You can find me at @BealGinner_ medium.seer on Instagram, on TikTok as BealGinner channel, and that's the TikTok one. And well, there's the Agartha Institute School, which is the school you were asking for, but I already have it there. But since I am very perfectionist, I am creating the syllabus, the manuals, the training, but that training will be given. And with the help of the spirits, I tell you, it is very much guided. So I'm very eager to continue.
BL, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. A hug from here, and I hope to see you soon.
I hope so. A hug, buddy, and a hug to everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I hope we meet again.
Thank you for attending this new episode of The Invisible. And it's worth asking you that if you like this episode, give it a like, share it, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe. That way, the algorithm will help us reach many more people with these interesting and important contents for each of us. And remember, reality is much more than what our eyes can see. See you in the next episode.